Fine.
Okay. Let me get out my list of questions here. How well do you remember the war?
Just a year and a half. I went in and my birthday was in '44, September, and they wanted to give me a deferment if I wanted deferment. I was working on a farm, and I said no, I'd rather not have a deferment. So then I was drafted, but
You were drafted?
I more or less enlisted, I guess, because I told them I didn't want a deferment. So they took me pretty quick then. And I went in the first of January, and I went to Great Lakes boot camp, which is up in Chicago.
Okay.
And they cut it down to 8 weeks. It was 10 weeks and 12 weeks, but they cut it down to 8 weeks because they wanted to kind of rush us guys through there.
Okay.
They figured that the war in the Pacific was going to be pretty bad yet. You know, it was kind of winding down in Europe, and it ended about in May in Europe, and they figured it was going to last a pretty good while in the Pacific, and Japan, to root them out of those islands and get, and they figured it probably lasted a good little while. So thankfully it ended when Truman dropped that bomb on
Right.
Hiroshima.
Where were you when you were drafted?
Pardon me?
Do you remember what you were doing when you were drafted?
What were you doing when you were drafted?
I was working on a farm,
You were working on a
raising
farm.
cattle and hogs,
Dilleridge.
and I was working for Louis Eckelkamp. I had a farm down there. Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Have you always lived in this area?
No, I was born in Nebraska, a little town called Mount Clair, Nebraska, and I was born there in 1926, and we lived there till 1935. My mom and dad bought a farm, and had good luck the first couple of years, and then they never raised another crop on it because of the dust storms and the drought. So they lost the farm then,
Really?
and we moved to Missouri.
How was life during the dust storm?
Yeah, I was just a kid then, but I can remember it was pretty bad. Some days would get pretty dark. In the middle of the day, it would get almost as dark as night, and the dust would swirl around. And in the morning, there'd be a coating of dust over all the furniture inside the house, everywhere.
Cabinets, windowsills.
That's crazy.
Just full. They couldn't stand it no more.
And there were a lot of those. They call them whirlybirds. Were dust devils, is what they were, and you could see them miles away. They'd be 100 feet wide and look like a mile high.
Really?
Yeah, and what caused it was the farmers got a little too greedy with raising wheat out there in the plains. They plowed up too much land, and the price of wheat went down. And the more the price of wheat went down, the more land they plowed up to try to make up for it. And they didn't use any conservation practices at all, and it caused it. Of course, the drought had a lot to do with it too. It didn't rain hardly at all.
And what were you doing during the dust storm? Have you always lived?
I always lived here. I was born in Lavity, and then my mom and dad moved to Arkansas for several years, and then we came back, and I've been here ever since. And we'll be married 64 years in November, so we've been here all our life.
Wow. And what were you doing during the start of the war?
I went to high school, and I worked here in town at
Where were you working?
it used to be
Gamble's store.
across from Schrader's.
Yeah, don't they still have the sign up?
They might have, but I worked there till Gamble's.
And what building is that now?
That's the dance hall, I believe, where they
The dance studio.
dance studio
Okay.
now, right across from Schrader's, one building up.
Okay. And what were you doing during the start of the war?
Pardon me?
What were you doing during the start of the war?
What were you doing the start of the war?
Oh, I was working on this farm.
You were still working?
Yeah.
You weren't in high school or anything?
No, I'd gone to 3 years of high school, and then I dropped out of high school.
You went 3 years
And I
to
took
the
a
seminary.
equivalent exam, high school equivalent exam, which I passed, And then I went to St. Joe's Seminary up in Westmont, Illinois, for 3 years. Yeah, and then I dropped out in 1942, I guess, 42. Yeah.
And during all this, World War II was going on, correct?
Yes, it started in 41, December 7th. Yeah.
What was life back home? Were you always kind of on edge, maybe being drafted?
Well, it was kind of tough during the war. Of course, everybody got into it. They had the gas rationing and there was meat rationing, and everybody kind of, with the war effort, people worked in defense plants. I don't know exactly. Pop was working for. He was driving a truck then. Yeah.
Did you guys have any victory gardens back home?
What?
What do you mean?
The victory gardens, it was, a lot of people kind of raised them. They had their gardens in the back.
Oh.
That way they had to buy less. No.
Oh, we always had gardens. We always had gardens.
And I lived on the Bluff Road. My mom and dad always had gardens
Okay.
too. We always had gardens.
So it's almost like you had a victory garden without
Yeah,
even knowing it.
that's
A lot of
right.
people in town were just growing them. That way they could help the soldiers overseas.
A garden was a necessity for us for many years. I mean, from as long as I can remember, we always had a big garden. Mom did a lot of canning, and we had a lot of fresh vegetables during the year. And of course, when the weather was good enough to have a garden.
You guys got a garden right now by any
No.
chance? Back there?
We're getting too old to do anything.
Before I went into the service, our parish priest at St. John's Guildhall House said, "Now, when you go into the service, it can either make a man of you or a bum." He says, "It's up to you." And depending on what kind of
Good way to put it.
choices you made.
Right. Do you remember hearing about the start of the war and what you were doing? Or just say perhaps in Pearl
Oh,
Harbor?
yeah, I remember it real well, yeah. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, yeah. When we got into it, yeah. But it had been going on quite a few years in Europe already, but we didn't get into it then till the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
What was it like back here, back at home, when you realized Pearl Harbor had been bombed?
Well, I don't know. Everybody was kind of hoping that we wouldn't get into it, that we'd stay out of it. But when that happened, why, everybody was behind it 100%. Not everybody, but almost 100%, I would say.
But you got over there just when it was.
Yeah, I went to Pearl Harbor after the war was over. Then I went to radio school, and while I was in radio school, the war ended in Europe, but the week we graduated from radio school, they dropped the bomb on Pearl Harbor. And,
Really?
yeah.
Okay. So, were you in a certain branch of the Army?
In the Navy.
The Navy, were you in a certain branch?
Were you in a certain branch of the Navy?
Oh, well, I was. They put me aboard ship. I went to radio school, and they put me aboard ship out there in California, and it was a submarine net tender, and what the submarine net tenders did, well, they stretched cable nets in the harbors to keep the enemy subs out of the harbors.
Really?
Yeah, it was a work ship. But they went pretty much all over in the Pacific. I mean, in the harbor, like we're up to Alaska and all along the coast and all harbors.
And you say you were in radio school. Were you the ones, like with Morse code? Was that what you
Oh yeah,
had to do?
yeah. We had to learn. First thing we had to do was learn the Morse code, and learn how to type and take these messages over the radio.
And that's what you were in charge of, huh? When you were in the Navy?
That's what I did. Yeah, after I got out of school, radio school.
Where were you stationed?
I was stationed at Tiburon, California. It was a small naval base out just past the Golden Gate Bridge. You'd go under the Great Golden Gate Bridge and maybe 4 or 5 miles or something up in the San Francisco Bay. It was a real small base there, but.
Okay.
And we hauled, after the war was over, they took these nets, these cable nets, and we hauled them out to the ocean. dumped them over the side.
Really? So they're just in the bottom of the
They had to
ocean
get rid of
somewhere
them.
now. So, did you ever see any combat or any pretty frightening experiences happen?
Did I see any combat?
Yeah.
No.
Relatively calm.
No.
What was some of the most memorable experiences you have?
Well, we had a lot of them.
Tell them about learning to swim. Those poor guys.
That was scary for people that didn't know how to swim. When we were in boot camp, everybody had to jump in the deep end of the 12-foot end of the pool, swimming pool. And these poor guys that didn't know how to swim, it worried them to death, and I could see why. I was lucky I knew how to swim. I wasn't a good swimmer, but I could stay on top of the water and get out of it. But these guys jumped off and they were scared to death, and you couldn't blame them, because a lot of times, they'd go down and they'd come up and they'd be paddling around and hollering for help, and they'd go down again. The lifeguard took their time to go after them. So it wasn't a very pleasant experience for them.
Some of them got sick, you said.
Yeah.
Water was that cold? Really? I'm guessing most of them learn how to swim, though.
Yeah, it is.
That's not how I learned to swim. Any other memorable experiences?
What?
Any other memorable experiences?
Oh, I had one when we were going out. I was a radioman, but we took turns on a wheel watch, and we'd go out under the bridge, San Francisco Bridge, and head out in the ocean. And we took a wheel watch, and the wheel was operated electronically, but you still turned it, and down in the motor room they had electric motors on it to turn the rudder. Okay. But anyway, we'd gone out, we'd gone about a little ways past the Golden Gate Bridge, and all of a sudden it started going around in a circle. The rudder stuck. And the captain got all excited and started screaming and hollering, "What was the matter with you? What are you doing?" And I told him, "I don't know." I said, "It won't work." so then they stopped the ship, and they went down in the motor room, and they operated manually then.
Really?
But it kind of scared me a little bit, because I would be yelling at me like that.
Who was your captain?
The captain, yeah.
Who was he?
Captain Sifford. His name was Sifford. I didn't like him.
I was going to ask, was he kind of intimidating or just real kind of harsh?
Well, yeah, he was. He just didn't have a very nice personality.
Okay.
Of course, maybe some of us had a little to do with that too. Then.
What was just the daily life while serving in the Navy?
Well, if you stood your watch, whatever your watch was, you had to stand watches. A radio watch. I had a radio watch on the ship, and other guys had a deck watch, and we had a regular routine. The meal times were regular, and by the way, we had good food. We had about the best food in the Navy. They claimed because of the work ship.
Well, that's lucky.
On Friday we had baked ham, candied sweet potatoes. I always remember the candied sweet potatoes, raisin gravy, and cooked cabbage. And it was good. It was delicious. We had a black man from Tennessee and a white cook from Kansas City, and between those two, they put on a heck of a meal all the time. We were lucky for far as food was concerned.
Yeah, no kidding. So you all had different positions on your ship, you say? Like deck watch and wheel watch and radio watch?
Yeah, that.
You had different positions.
Oh yeah, and then we had to have deck watch at night when everybody was in the bunk, and I had deck watch one night when we pulled a harbor at was it Portland, Oregon? Wherever it was, I'm not sure it was Portland, but they had a terrific tide there. They didn't tell me about that tide, and the tide was going out, And see, we had the ship snugged up to the harbor there, and all of a sudden everything started popping, and boy, one of the chief bosun mate came out and said, "What in the world's going on here?" He says, "You got to loosen those ropes." And we were ropes tied around the pier, you know, and they were getting pretty tight. So they didn't tell me. I didn't know about that tide. All I did was walk back and forth on the deck.
So you were in Portland, Oregon at the time?
Pardon me?
You were in Portland, Oregon?
I think it was Portland.
Where all did you go? Were you along the coast?
San Francisco, the Tiburon, and I think, I'm sure we were at Astoria, and I think it was Portland where that.
And what was the whole?
No, wait a minute. It wasn't Portland. Astoria is more on the ocean, or right on the ocean, at the mouth of the Columbia River, and Portland's more inland. So I guess I'm not sure, but I guess maybe it was Astoria, Oregon.
What was the whole point of the deck watch? What were you watching for?
Was it like a guard? See if anything happens, anything like loosening the ropes so the ship don't get hung up on the pier.
Did anything ever happen when you or any of your friends were on deck watch?
What happened?
Anything happened while you were?
No, nothing too exciting. That was about as exciting as it got for me.
What did you do to entertain yourself during the war?
Well, some of the things I'd not rather talk about.
I understand.
Well, we had pretty when we were in the harbor like that. We had pretty much overnight leave or short leave for the evening. If you weren't on duty, you could go out and you could scout around town. You know.
So you got to kind of see some of the places you went.
Yeah. Oh, I remember one night a couple of us hiked up to. There was a monument up there for Lewis and Clark at was it Astoria, Oregon, I think. That was where they wound up. The Lewis and Clark expedition has wound up on the west coast was at Astoria, and up on a small mountain there, or a small rise, they had a monument for Lewis and Clark, and I had relatives lived out in Oregon, and once in a while on a weekend, if they had a weekend off, they would pick me up, and it was pretty nice. They'd take me like for a picnic or something like that. Oregon is a beautiful country. Beautiful country.
I hear it's very.
Yeah, it rains a lot there, but in the season it rains a lot. But it's a nice country.
When you weren't in the war, this goes to both of you guys. How would you guys have fun back home, even when you weren't in combat?
We didn't have no television or anything when we got married. No automatic washer, dryer, nothing. And we played cards, a lot of cards.
Really?
The kids in the evening, different games. Sit there and play. That's all we had to do because we had.
That sounds nice.
Yeah.
I was lucky I found her about 65 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, we went together 2 years before we got there.
At least 65 years ago when I met you, yeah.
And you guys had. So you said it was 2 years after the war is when you two met?
It was 1940.
I graduated in high school in 47 and we got married in 49.
Yeah, okay, I met you in 47, yeah.
How did you meet?
Up at a dance at Campbellton Hall.
Really?
You know where Campbellton is?
It's just
You know where Smiling Sam's is?
Yeah.
There was a hall there.
Really?
Campbellton Hall, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well, it wasn't actually where Smiling Sam's. It was where you turn in there at that little town of Campbellton.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess you guys hit it off pretty good, huh?
Yeah, we went together.
Yeah. They used to have a lot of those little dance halls out in the country. Yeah.
So I guess that could have been another form of having fun. Huh?
Yeah.
Just
we
dances.
dance. Yeah. Go out or go to a movie. We had movies.
Was it where it is now?
We had what do you call them outside?
Drive-in.
Drive-in. Yeah.
I always wanted to go to a drive-in,
Yeah.
but they don't have them anymore.
No.
That always sounds like a cool thing
Yeah.
to me.
Drive-in we went.
Do you remember back to the war, what you were doing when it ended, or where you were?
Where were you when the war ended? Where's your last place?
Oh, I was, where was I? I guess I was out in Portland, Oregon. Yeah, we were decommissioning ships there. We were at, we had to find all the parts, all the parts that were on the ship, the things that they used for this and that and everything. We had to number them and find the serial number on them, and make a recording of it. And I remember sometime when we found some things that we couldn't find the number for them, the serial number. So about midnight, we'd throw them over the side.
Guess that's the easiest way to do it, huh?
I shouldn't tell you things like that.
Hey, I like it. I like it.
No, that's where I was when I was discharged. Well, when I noticed I'd be discharged, but I went to came back to St. Louis to a naval station in North St. Louis, up there by the airport, and that's where I got my discharge papers.
Was there a big celebration?
Well, when the war ended, we were in radio school, about to graduate, and we had a lot of celebration down there in the barracks when we heard that the war was over.
Right.
Well, everybody felt pretty happy about it because we were all figuring on going out there and having a rough time, but
Right.
luckily it never happened.
What were you doing when the war ended?
You were still in high
I
school.
was still in high school.
Yeah, it ended in.
I bet the mood was pretty good at the high school, though.
Yeah, well, we just had to keep going. I lived on a farm then,
Right.
and we didn't have no bus, and I rode with anybody that come along the rough road to go to school.
Really?
Yeah. And then finally my dad went into milking business, and I rode with the milkman to school.
How did you, where'd you go to school?
I went 8 years to Zigamar out there on the highway.
Little country school
Okay.
out there where, yeah, out there where those churches are out there. What is it? What is the road that turns off?
Fellowship Church and KK. You know.
Highway KK there.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been out to see a high school out there.
No, it wasn't
No.
high school. That was a grade school.
Oh,
but
okay.
8 grades, but I went to Borgia High School.
You did? Okay.
They had 8 grades in one little country school. And if you go by there sometime, you look on the right before when you
The
turn
red
off on
building.
KK, and
Not to fall down.
there's a little red building there. It's not very big. That's where they had 8 grades of school.
Wow.
Yeah, 8 of us. And one teacher for all 8 grades of us. Was 5 in my grade.
How could one teacher teach all 8
He
grades?
did. He did it. Mrs. Daly from Pacific. She was really good.
Holy cow.
And we had a priest. A father would come out there once a week. Talk to
Really?
us.
Where did you go to school here in Missouri, or were you still back?
I went to a little country school out in Nebraska till the 5th grade. A little old country school out. I went there for a couple of years. Then I went to town, which is about 4 miles from our farm, and I went to what had a Catholic school, a Sacred Heart. And then from there we moved to Union. I went to Immaculate Conception for a couple of years, and then we moved to St. John's Gilda-House, and I went 1 year there, the 8th grade. And from there I went to seminary up at St. Joe's, Westmont, Illinois.
Okay.
And after that I came back home, and I quit the seminary, and I went to work different places, and I finally wound up working at this farm.
Then eventually you got drafted, like you said.
Yeah.
How did you, who told you the news that the war was over?
Oh, I don't remember.
Because, like you said, there was no TV
No.
and radio, possibly, newspaper.
Yeah, the news didn't travel as fast then as it does now.
All right. It's instant.
Sure didn't. I don't even remember.
Do you remember by any chance?
How we what?
Do you
Do you
remember
remember when it ended?
Oh yeah, I sure do. Yeah.
And who told you?
Well, we heard it. We heard it. We were in radio school there, and they heard it on the news there.
That's right.
Yeah.
They did get instant news.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
they
that was
got
his job.
instant news. Yeah.
When you got back home, how were you received when you got back to your families and friends?
Oh, everybody was happy. Everybody was happy to see you, and naturally you were happy to be home. Everybody treated you real well. Yeah. Even if you weren't a hero, they treated you like one.
Right. Right. Did you have any relatives in the war?
My brother.
Your brother?
Yeah, and my other brother was just in the reserves, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And our son, our oldest son,
That was later on, but
yeah.
I had quite a few relatives in Europe. My brother-in-law was in the Pacific, and I had one of them was shot down over in Germany.
A brother?
No, a relative, a cousin, and he was a prisoner of war over there. There were quite a few. Ed Fry was another.
My dad was in it.
Your dad was in World War One.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
A picture of him in World War One.
And I had an uncle in World War One. Was badly wounded over in the Argonne Forest.
Did you ever discuss World War One with them?
Not just too much.
My mom talked about it a lot because
We never did.
see, my mom was born in 1894, and that's the same year your parents were born. But they were pretty familiar with World War One, and even the Civil War. They remember so much from the Civil War.
Really?
Yeah, Mom used to tell us stories about Civil War. How about after these battles, these scavengers would come around and steal rings off those dead soldiers' fingers. They'd steal their watches. It was pretty bad.
Wow. Where was she living? Was she living in the South, the North?
No, I was living in Nebraska.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Okay.
No.
Your relatives that were in war, did they see any combat? Like you said, your brother?
Floyd never saw.
Yeah, he was in Korea.
Yeah, that's
yeah, he's,
Really?
Yeah.
yeah, he saw combat over in Korea. Yeah.
He never did. He never did say much about it. Though,
No,
so
no.
He never did. But him and my brother and my brother-in-law and Herb all went on this honor flight Tuesday. Past Tuesday.
That's what I heard. How was the honor flight?
Oh, it was nice.
Was it?
I'll show you after a while some of the things that we had.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
I hear that's amazing. It's just one day, right? They
One
fly
day.
out and they fly you back in.
25 hours.
25 hours from time I left, time I got back.
Yeah.
Holy cow!
25. They had 25 motorcycles out, escorted them from. The
Yeah, they
airport
treated us like royalty.
Bus
It was unbelievable the way that they treated us. It was just.
Then everyone got off the motorcycles here at the bus station and shook hands with every one of the
Good.
veterans.
How was it in D.C.? What all did you do in Washington, D.C.?
Well, we went to the World War II monument, the Vietnam monument, the Korean monument. We saw the Washington monument, this big tall, right. And the Lincoln Memorial. All those places of interest
The Pentagon.
there. The Pentagon. We got a glimpse of the White House. But I was surprised that, and Arlington National Cemetery, that was the most amazing thing. It was huge. I don't know if you've ever seen Jefferson Barracks.
Right.
The-
I have.
This was Arlington National Cemetery, I'd say is 10 times as big.
Wow.
There are rows and rows of graves, field after field after field, both sides of the road we drove on. And it was, I don't know how many are there, but see, they've been burying soldiers there since the Civil War. That's when it started. And then we got to view the changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And that was really impressive. That was very impressive.
Very neat. I bet that was very special for most of your veterans to go
Yeah.
see all that.
Yeah. It was a nice day. It was very interesting and worthwhile.
How did where